Captain Jake Morrison stood at the edge of the great council chamber, watching alien faces that showed nothing but cold judgment. The huge room stretched out before him like a metal canyon, filled with beings from across the galaxy. Some had scales, others had tentacles, and a few looked almost human except for their strange colored skin and extra eyes. All of them stared down at the small group of humans standing in the center. Ambassador Lisa Carter walked forward with slow, careful steps. Her black suit looked plain and simple next to the fancy robes and glowing armor worn by the alien council members. Jake could see her hand shake just a little, but her voice would be steady when she spoke. She had practiced this moment for months. The Zephyrian Chancellor sat on the highest chair in the room. His name was Vextar, and he looked like a giant, blue lizard with silver markings on his face. His yellow eyes focused on Lisa as she reached the speaking area. When he opened his mouth, his voice echoed through the chamber like thunder. "Ambassador Carter of the species called humans," Vextar said, making the word humans sound like something dirty. "Your people have been called before this council to answer for your crimes against galactic peace." Lisa lifted her chin higher. "What crimes? Earth has followed every treaty and agreement we signed when we joined the Galaxy Council 20 years ago. A creature that looked like a walking tree with too many arms made a sound like wind through leaves. Your military grows too strong. Your ships move too fast. Your weapons cut through our best shields like they are made of paper. We defend ourselves and our colonies," Lisa said. "The Rakthul pirates attacked our settlements for 3 years. We had to build better ships to protect our people." Vextar's tail moved back and forth behind his chair, a sign that he was getting angry. "You defeated the Rakthul too easily. Ships that should have taken decades to build were finished in months. Technology that should have taken centuries to develop appeared in just a few years. Your species moves too fast, changes too quickly. This frightens the other members of our council." Jake Morrison felt his jaw tighten. He had commanded one of those ships during the Rakthul War. He had seen human colonies burning while the Galaxy Council debated whether to help. By the time they decided to send aid, humans had already won the war on their own. Admiral Helen Brooks stood next to Jake, her gray uniform clean and pressed. She touched a small device on her wrist, so quickly that most people would not notice. Jake knew what that meant. Back on Earth, President Alex Turner was listening to every word through hidden cameras and microphones. "The Galaxy Council has reached a decision," Vextar announced. The chamber fell silent. Even the air recycling systems seemed to stop making noise. "The human species will surrender all military technology that exceeds Council standards. You will allow Council inspectors on all human worlds. You will limit your population growth and colonial expansion. You will submit to our guidance in all matters of science and defense." Lisa Carter's face went pale, but she did not step back. "And if we refuse? Then Earth will be cut off from all galactic trade. No human ship will be allowed to dock at Council stations. No human citizen will be permitted to travel beyond your own solar system. Your species will be alone in the galaxy until you learn to follow our rules." The alien council members nodded their heads or moved their tentacles or made whatever motion their species used to show agreement. They had talked about this for months in secret meetings. They thought humans would have no choice but to accept. Jake Morrison looked at Admiral Brooks. She was older than him by 15 years, with gray hair and scars on her hands from her early days as a fighter pilot. She had fought in more battles than any other human alive. Now she was listening to aliens tell her that humans were too dangerous to be free. Admiral Brooks touched her wrist device again. This time she held it down for 3 seconds. Jake knew that signal too. It meant President Turner had made his choice. Lisa Carter was quiet for a long moment. The entire chamber waited. Finally, she spoke in a voice that was calm and clear. "The United Earth Federation rejects your ultimatum," she said. "We refuse to surrender our technology. We refuse to accept your inspectors. We refuse to limit our growth or our freedom." Vextar's yellow eyes grew wide. "Then you choose isolation. You choose to be cut off from galactic civilization." "No," Lisa said, and now her voice grew stronger. "We choose something else entirely. The United Earth Federation formally withdraws from the Galaxy Council. We reject your authority over humanity. We declare our complete independence from this body and all its treaties. The chamber exploded into noise. Aliens jumped up from their seats, shouting in languages that sounded like music or static or breaking glass. Some pointed at the humans with claws or tentacles. Others activated translation devices and screamed threats in broken English. Lisa, Carter waited for the noise to die down, then continued. Any attempt to force your will on Earth or human colonies will be considered an act of war. We are done taking orders from those who fear us simply because we refuse to be weak. She turned and walked toward the exit. Jake Morrison and Admiral Brooks followed her, along with a dozen other humans who had come to hear the Council's decision. None of them looked back at the chaos behind them. As they reached the doors, Vextar's voice boomed over the noise. You cannot survive alone. No species has ever left the Council and succeeded. You will come crawling back within a year, begging us to accept you again. Lisa Carter stopped at the doorway and looked back one final time. Chancellor Vextar, you are about to learn something important about humans. We have never crawled to anyone, and we never will. The doors closed behind them with a soft sound that seemed much too quiet after all the shouting. In the hallway outside, Jake Morrison took his first deep breath in hours. Admiral, he said quietly, I hope the President knows what he's doing. Admiral Brooks smiled, and for the first time that day she looked truly happy. Captain Morrison, Alex Turner has been planning for this day since before you were born. The Galaxy Council thinks they just won. They have no idea what's coming next. 3 months had passed since Earth walked away from the Galaxy Council. Chancellor Vextar stood in his private office, staring at reports that made no sense. His yellow eyes moved across the data screens, reading the same numbers over and over again. They should be begging by now, he said to his assistant, a thin creature with purple skin and 4 arms. No species can survive without galactic trade. The humans must be desperate. His assistant made a nervous clicking sound with her mouth. Chancellor, the reports are strange. Human colonies are not asking for help. They are not trying to contact us at all. Vextar's tail moved in anger. Then they are hiding their weakness. Send spies to watch their border worlds. I want to know how badly they are suffering. Far away from the council chambers, Dr. Kate Sullivan stood in a laboratory deep under the mountains of Colorado. She was a thin woman with brown hair and glasses that were always a little crooked. Around her, hundreds of scientists worked at computers and machines that hummed with power. Status report, she called out to her team. A young man with red hair looked up from his screen. All colonies have confirmed successful transition to closed-loop systems. Food production is at 112% of requirements. Energy generation is stable. Manufacturing is ahead of schedule. Dr. Sullivan smiled. She had been working on this project for 25 years, ever since she was a graduate student. Back then, her professors had called her paranoid for wanting to build completely independent human colonies. Now those same professors were helping her prove that humans could survive without the galaxy. What about the evacuation? She asked. A woman with black hair and tired eyes answered from across the room. Commander Davis reports that 60% of human personnel have been extracted from galactic space. The remaining 40% will be home within 2 months. Commander Ryan Davis was having the busiest time of his life. He stood on the bridge of a transport ship called the New Horizon, watching stars streak past the windows. This was his 15th trip this month, carrying humans away from alien worlds and back to human space. Captain, his navigation officer said, we have clearance to dock at Station Kepler 7. They have 300 humans waiting for pickup. Ryan nodded. Kepler 7 was a trading station run by the Manthari, one of the older species in the Galaxy Council. For 200 years, humans had lived and worked there alongside dozens of alien species. Now they were all coming home. The docking went smoothly. Ryan walked through the station corridors, looking at the faces of the aliens they passed. Some looked curious, others looked worried. A few looked angry. The Manthari station master, a being that looked like a walking octopus, met Ryan at the human quarters. "Commander Davis," the alien said through a translation device, "I do not understand why your people are leaving. We have had good relations for many years." Ryan stopped walking and looked at the alien. "Station Master Kelatar, we have nothing against you personally, but your government voted to support the Council's ultimatum against Earth. We cannot stay where we are not wanted. But the human engineers maintain our power systems. The human doctors run our medical bay. The human teachers work in our schools. How will we manage without you?" Ryan felt a little sad as he answered, "You will figure it out. You always did. Before humans came here." But as Ryan walked away, he knew the alien was right to be worried. Humans had not just lived on alien worlds. They had improved them. They had fixed problems that had existed for centuries. They had made life better for everyone around them. Dr. Kate Sullivan knew this too. She stood in her laboratory, watching. Reports come in from across the galaxy. Human-designed water purification systems were starting to break down without maintenance. Farms that used human agricultural techniques were producing less food. Transportation networks that relied on human engineering were slowing down. "Doctor," one of her assistants said, "we are getting communication requests from 17 different alien governments. They want to hire human contractors to maintain their systems." "Tell them to contact the Galaxy Council," Dr. Sullivan replied. "We no longer provide services to council members." President Alex Turner sat in his office in Washington, reading the same reports that Dr. Sullivan was watching. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes, but today those eyes looked very serious. Across from him sat Admiral Helen Brooks, still wearing her military uniform. "The plan is working better than we expected," Admiral Brooks said. "The aliens thought they could force us to submit by cutting us off from their civilization. They never realized that we were quietly holding their civilization together." President Turner nodded. "How long before they understand what they have lost?" 6 months, maybe less. The Zephyrians will be the last to admit it, but even they will feel the effects soon. On the other side of the galaxy, Chancellor Vexitar was beginning to suspect that something was wrong. His spies had finally reached the edge of human space, but what they found was not what he expected. Instead of struggling colonies barely surviving without galactic support, they found new cities rising from empty worlds. They found massive ships being built in orbital shipyards. They found humans working with technology that looked more advanced than anything in the Galaxy Council. "This is impossible," Vexitar said, reading the spy reports. "They have been isolated for only 3 months. Where did they get this technology?" His assistant clicked nervously again. "Chancellor, our intelligence suggests that humans have been preparing for this isolation for many years, perhaps decades." Vexitar felt a cold fear in his chest. "Are you telling me that they planned this? That they wanted to leave the Council?" "It appears that way, Chancellor. The humans were ready for our ultimatum before we gave it." Far away on Earth, Dr. Kate Sullivan was giving a presentation to a room full of government officials and military leaders. Behind her, a huge screen showed images of human colonies that were growing larger every day. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "for 50 years we have been building a backup plan. While the Galaxy Council believed we were dependent on them, we were actually becoming independent. Every human colony can now produce its own food, energy, and manufactured goods. Every human ship can operate without alien technology or alien fuel." She clicked a button, and the screen showed a new image. It was a star map with red dots marking human colonies and green lines showing trade routes between them. "We are not isolated," she continued. "We have simply created our own network, a network that does not need the Galaxy Council's permission to exist." President Turner stood up and walked to the front of the room. "Dr. Sullivan's team has given us something precious. They have given us freedom. Real freedom, not the limited independence that the Council was willing to allow." He looked around the room at the faces of his advisors and military commanders. "The Galaxy Council thought they were punishing us. Instead, they have freed us to become something new, something they were never going to let us become while they controlled us." Admiral Brooks smiled as she listened to the president speak. Outside the windows of the meeting room, She could see construction crews working on something that would have been impossible, while Earth was still part of the Galaxy Council. They were building ships designed purely by human engineering, powered by human technology, and crewed by humans who answered to no alien authority. The Galaxy Council had wanted to keep humanity small and weak and dependent. Instead, they had forced humanity to become strong and independent and free. In trying to control the humans, they had lost them completely, and as the months passed, they would learn that losing humanity was going to cost them much more than they had ever imagined. 1 year had passed since Earth left the Galaxy Council. Captain Ben Rodriguez floated in his ship's command chair, staring at the data his scanners were showing him. He was a stocky man with dark hair and scars on his hands from years of military service. His ship, the Deep Scout, was designed to be invisible to alien sensors while it watched from the shadows. "Captain," his sensor officer said, "you need to see this." Ben looked at the main screen. It showed a planet that had been nothing but rocks and ice when humans first mapped it 5 years ago. Now it was covered with cities that glowed like stars against the dark surface. Massive ships moved between orbital stations that looked like floating cities themselves. "How many people live there now?" Ben asked. "Scanners show at least 10 million, sir, and they are still building." Ben shook his head in amazement. The humans on that world had arrived only 8 months ago, but they had already turned a dead planet into a thriving colony. He had seen 6 other worlds just like it in the past month. Earth's colonies were not just surviving without the Galaxy Council, they were growing faster than anyone thought possible. "Take us to the next system," Ben ordered. "Command wants a full report on all human expansion." Meanwhile, in the Galaxy Council chambers, Chancellor Vexitar was reading reports that made his headache worse every day. His yellow eyes were tired and his blue scales looked dull. The council meeting had been going on for hours and everyone was arguing. "The Manthari Empire has lost 3 colonies this month," announced a being that looked like a giant insect. "Their people are leaving to find work in systems where the technology still functions." A creature with tentacles instead of arms waved them angrily. "The Coral Federation cannot maintain their deep space mining operations. All their equipment was designed by humans. Without human engineers, the machines break down faster than we can repair them." Vexitar's tail moved slowly behind his chair. "Surely you exaggerate. The humans were useful, but they were not essential." "Chancellor," said a voice from the back of the chamber. It belonged to Ambassador Thexari of the Warlani Republic. She was one of the few aliens who had always been friendly to humans. 3 of our major trade routes have collapsed. The navigation systems, the fuel refineries, the cargo handling equipment, all of it was built or improved by human engineers. We cannot replace their knowledge. Dr. Kate Sullivan stood in her laboratory on Earth, watching the same reports that the Galaxy Council was trying to ignore. She was smiling as she read the data that her spy network was sending back from across the galaxy. "Doctor," her assistant said, "we have confirmation that the Zephyrian homeworld is having power problems. Their main energy grid has been failing for weeks." Kate nodded. "Of course it is. Humans designed the control systems for their fusion reactors. Without regular maintenance updates, the systems will eventually crash." Another scientist looked up from his computer. "The Coral mining operation in the Vega system has shut down completely. They are asking if we know any human engineers who might work as independent contractors." "Tell them we do not provide referrals to Galaxy Council members," Kate replied. "They made their choice when they supported the ultimatum against Earth." Far across the galaxy, Samantha Wells sat in a small cafe on the Galactic capital station. She looked like any other human tourist, with brown hair and simple clothes. But Samantha was actually Earth's best intelligence officer, and she had been living undercover for 6 months. At the table next to her, 2 alien businessmen were talking in worried voices. One was a Manthari, the octopus-like species that ran many of the galaxy's trading companies. The other was a Zephyrian official who worked for the council government. "The situation is getting worse every day," the Manthari was saying. "My shipping company has lost 40% of its business. The human-designed cargo ships are breaking down and no one knows how to fix them properly. The Zephyrian official looked around nervously before answering. Between you and me, the Council is in panic. Half the member species are talking about leaving to establish independent contact with Earth. The humans are not suffering from isolation. We are. Samantha sipped her coffee and listened carefully. This was exactly the kind of information that President Turner needed to hear. Admiral Helen Brooks stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the construction of something that no one in the galaxy had ever seen before. Through the large windows, she could see dozens of shipyards working day and night. They were building a fleet of ships that could travel anywhere in the galaxy without needing to stop for fuel or supplies. Admiral, her communications officer, said, "We have a priority message from Earth Command." Helen read the message on her personal screen. It was from President Turner, and it contained new orders that made her smile. The Galaxy Council was about to learn that Earth had not spent the last year hiding in fear. "Signal all ships," she ordered. "Prepare for Operation New Frontier. It is time to show the galaxy what humanity has become." Back on the Galactic Capital Station, Chancellor Vexitar received a report that made his blood run cold. His security chief, a warrior from the fierce Grakari species, stood before his desk with fear in his eyes. "Chancellor," the security chief said, "our long-range scanners have detected something impossible. The humans are not just maintaining their existing colonies. They are expanding into regions of space that we have never explored." Vexitar stood up from his chair. "That is impossible. Those regions are too dangerous. The radiation levels alone would kill any known species." "Apparently not humans, sir. Our scientists believe they have developed new types of ships and protective equipment. They are claiming territory in 3 different galactic arms simultaneously." Vexitar felt his legs grow weak. He sat back down and stared at the star map on his wall. For thousands of years, the Galaxy Council had controlled the pace of expansion and exploration. They had decided which species could settle which worlds. They had maintained order and stability by keeping everyone dependent on the Council's resources and knowledge. Now the humans were ignoring all of those rules. They were going wherever they wanted, building whatever they wanted, and doing it, all without asking permission from anyone. "Sir," his security chief continued, "there is more. The Manthari Empire has formally requested that we allow them to establish independent diplomatic relations with Earth. They say they cannot afford to follow our trade restrictions any longer." Vexitar's worst nightmare was coming true. The Council was not just losing control of the humans. They were losing control of everyone else too. Species that had been loyal Council members for centuries were now looking at Earth with envy and admiration. Dr. Kate Sullivan received a message that evening. That made her laugh out loud. It was from the Worlani Republic, one of the more reasonable alien governments. They were offering to pay Earth millions of credits if human engineers would come and fix their failing infrastructure. Send them a polite reply, she told her communications officer. Tell them that Earth is no longer in the business of providing aid to Galaxy Council members. However, individual human colonies might be willing to negotiate independent contracts. It was a subtle but important difference. Earth was not going to help the Council as a whole, but individual human communities might choose to work with individual alien species. It was the beginning of a new kind of galactic politics, one where the old central authority no longer mattered. President Turner read the same message in his office, along with 17 others just like it. Species from across the galaxy were reaching out to Earth, not through the Council but directly. They were offering trade agreements, defense contracts, and research partnerships. "Alex," Admiral Brooks said as she entered his office, "we have a problem. The Council is planning something desperate. Our intelligence suggests they are considering military action against one of our colonies." President Turner looked up from his papers. "Which colony?" "New Geneva. It is our most visible settlement, and the Council thinks it will be easy to destroy. They want to make an example that will force other human colonies to surrender." Turner was quiet for a moment, then he smiled. "Admiral, how long until our new fleet is ready for action?" "The ships are ready now, sir. We have been waiting for your orders." "Then it is time for the galaxy to see what happens when someone threatens a human colony." The Council wanted to teach us a lesson about respecting their authority. Instead, they are about to learn a lesson about respecting ours. 2 years after Earth left the Galaxy Council, Commodore Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his new ship, the Independence. He was no longer the captain who had watched Ambassador Carter walk out of the Council chambers. Now he wore the uniform of Earth's Diplomatic Defense Force, a military branch that had not existed when Earth was still part of the galactic community. "Commodore," his communications officer said, "we are receiving a response from the Warlani Republic. They agree to the proposed trade agreement." Jake nodded as he read the message on his screen. The Warlani were the 4th species this month to leave the Galaxy Council and join what was now called the Free Worlds Alliance. It was a loose group of independent governments that preferred to deal directly with Earth rather than through the old Council system. "Signal the fleet," Jake ordered. "Set course for the Kepler system. We have a treaty signing to attend." Dr. Marcus Webb sat in his office on Luna Station, Earth's moon-based diplomatic center. He was a quiet man with gray hair and patient eyes who had spent his career studying alien cultures. Now he was Earth's chief negotiator with the growing number of species that wanted to establish independent relationships with humanity. "Dr. Webb," his assistant said, "the Corral Federation has agreed to our terms. They will provide rare minerals in exchange for our engineers helping them repair their mining equipment." Marcus smiled. "Excellent. That makes 12 independent trade agreements this month. Make sure to emphasize that these are partnerships between equals, not the master-servant relationships that the Council preferred." On the other side of the galaxy, Chancellor Vextar paced back and forth in his private chambers. His blue scales had lost their shine, and his yellow eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep. Reports covered his desk, each one telling him about another species that had left the Council to join the Free Worlds Alliance. "This cannot continue," he said to his military advisor, General Krextar. "The humans are destroying everything we have built. They are turning the galaxy against us." General Krextar was a member of the warrior Grakari species, with thick gray skin and muscles that could crush steel. "Chancellor, I have a solution. The human colony on New Geneva is lightly defended. One quick strike will show the galaxy that humans are not invincible. Other species will see that we still have power." Vexitar stopped pacing. "You want to attack a human colony?" "One colony, sir. A surgical strike that eliminates their military facilities and forces them to surrender. Once the humans realize they cannot protect their people, they will come back to negotiate." Vextar looked at the star map on his wall. New Geneva was a beautiful world that humans had settled only 18 months ago. Intelligence reports said it had about 2 million people, and a small defense force. It seemed like an easy target. "How many ships would you need?" Vextar asked. 200 of our best warships, sir. More than enough to overwhelm any human defenses." On New Geneva, Captain Lisa Monroe stood in the command center of the Planetary Defense Station. She was a young woman with red hair and green eyes who had volunteered to help protect one of humanity's newest colonies. Through her windows, she could see the cities that had grown up around the first human settlements. "Captain," her sensor operator called out, "we have multiple contacts approaching from hyperspace. 200 ships, all showing Galaxy Council markings." Lisa felt her heart start beating faster, but her voice remained calm. "Sound general alert. Contact Earth Command immediately. Tell them we have a Council fleet approaching with hostile intent." The message reached Admiral Helen Brooks within minutes. She sat in her command chair aboard the EDS Liberty, surrounded by a fleet that the Galaxy Council had never seen before. For 2 years, Earth had been building ships that used technology decades ahead of anything in galactic space. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "New Geneva confirms that the Council fleet is moving to attack position. They will be in weapons range in 1 hour." Helen looked at the displays around her. Earth's new fleet was spread across 3 star systems, invisible to enemy sensors but ready to move at a moment's notice. "Signal all ships. Execute Operation Shield Wall. It is time to show the Council what happens when they threaten human civilians." The Battle of New Geneva began exactly as Chancellor Vextar had planned. 200 Council warships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, their weapons powered and shields raised. General Krekstar commanded the fleet from his flagship, confident that the small human colony would surrender without a fight. "General," his communications officer said, "we are receiving a transmission from the planet." Captain Lisa Monroe's face appeared on the screen. "Council Fleet, this is Captain Monroe of the New Geneva Defense Force. You are in violation of human space. Leave immediately or face the consequences." General Krekstar laughed. "Little human, you have 12 defense ships against our 200. Surrender now and we will be merciful." Lisa's expression did not change. "General, you have made a mistake. We are not alone." That was when the Council Fleet's sensors detected something impossible. Ships were appearing out of nowhere, materializing from empty space like ghosts becoming solid. First 10, then 50, then 100. Within minutes, the Council Fleet was surrounded by human warships that seemed to have appeared from thin. Air Admiral Helen Brooks opened communications to the Council Fleet. "General Krekstar, this is Admiral Brooks of the Earth Defense Force. You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and surrender, or we will consider you a hostile force." Krekstar stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. The human ships were unlike anything he had ever seen. They were sleek and deadly with energy signatures that his computers could not identify. Worse, his sensors showed that there were not just 100 human ships but over 300, with more appearing every minute. "This is impossible," he whispered. "How did they get so many ships here so quickly?" His tactical officer's voice was shaking. "Sir, our computers cannot lock onto their ships. Their defensive systems are jamming our targeting computers. And sir, their weapons are charging, energy levels are off the scale." Krekstar had been a warrior for 40 years. He had fought in dozens of battles and had never retreated from a fight. But as he looked at the human fleet surrounding him, he felt real fear for the first time in his life. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "Prepare for battle. We came here to teach the humans a lesson, and we will finish what we started." The battle lasted exactly 47 minutes. When it was over, the entire Council fleet was either destroyed or captured. Not a single human ship was even damaged. The technology gap between the Council's weapons and Earth's defenses was so wide that it was not really a battle at all. Admiral Brooks broadcast the footage of the battle to every inhabited system in the galaxy. The message was simple and clear. Earth had not spent 2 years in hiding. They had spent 2 years becoming something far more powerful than anyone had imagined. Dr. Marcus Webb received emergency communications from 18 different alien governments within hours of the battle. They were all asking the same thing. How could they join the Free Worlds Alliance immediately? President Alex Turner addressed the galaxy from his office on Earth. 2 years ago, the Galaxy Council demanded that humanity submit to their authority or face isolation. We chose freedom. Instead, today they tried to force us to submit through violence. They have learned that threatening human civilians is a mistake they will not make again. He looked directly into the camera, speaking to billions of beings across the galaxy. Earth offers partnership to any species that wants to join us in building a better future. We offer friendship to those who respect our independence, but to those who would threaten our people or try to control our destiny, we offer only this warning. Humanity is no longer the weak species that joined your council 20 years ago. We have become something new, something stronger, and something that will not be conquered. Chancellor Vextar watched the president's speech from his office, knowing that his career was over. Half the Galaxy Council had already voted to remove him from power. The other half were too busy trying to establish secret contacts with Earth to care about his leadership. The galaxy had changed forever. The old order was dead, and a new one was being born. And at the center of it all was a species that had refused to be controlled, refused to be limited, and refused to be anything less than free. The Council had tried to teach humanity a lesson about power. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy a lesson about what happens when you try to cage a species that was born to be free. 5 years had passed since Earth walked away from the Galaxy Council. Captain Jenny Walsh stood on the observation deck of the exploration ship New Horizons, watching a sight that filled her with wonder. Through the reinforced windows, she could See ships from dozens of different species working together to build a massive space station. Humans worked alongside Worlani engineers, coral miners, and even some former council species who had joined the Free Worlds Alliance. "Captain," her science officer called out, "the archaeological team has finished their analysis of the ruins on the fourth planet. You need to see what they found." Jenny made her way to the science lab, where Dr. Sarah Kim was examining ancient artifacts on her workstation. Sarah was a small woman with black hair who specialized in studying dead civilizations. The excitement in her eyes told Jenny that this discovery was important. "Captain," Sarah said, "these ruins are over 50,000 years old. They belong to a species that once controlled this entire region of the galaxy. But look at this." She pointed to symbols carved into a piece of metal that looked almost new despite its age. "This is a government document. It talks about something called the Central Authority and its rules for controlling member species. Sound familiar?" Jenny felt a chill run down her spine. "You mean there was another Galaxy Council 50,000 years ago?" "Not just similar," Sarah replied. "Almost identical. The Central Authority demanded that all member species limit their technology, restrict their expansion, and submit to central oversight. Any species that refused was isolated and punished." Sarah pulled up more images on her screen. "But here is the interesting part. The archaeological evidence shows that this civilization collapsed not because of war or disease, but because of stagnation. They became so focused on maintaining control that they stopped growing, stopped exploring, stopped innovating. Eventually, they just faded away." Jenny stared at the ancient symbols. "And the species that refused to submit? Most of them were destroyed by the Central Authority, but a few escaped to the outer regions of the galaxy. Those species survived and eventually became the ancestors of the races we know today." Dr. Kate Sullivan received Sarah's report in her office on Earth. She was older now, with gray hair and lines around her eyes, but her mind was as sharp as ever. She read the archaeological findings 3 times before calling President Turner. "Alex," she said when he answered, "you need to see this immediately. Dr. Kim has found proof that we did the right thing by leaving the council." President Turner was in his 2nd term now, and the stress of leading humanity through its greatest transformation had aged him. But when he read Sarah's report, he smiled for the first time in weeks. "Kate," he said, "schedule a meeting with the Free Worlds Alliance Council. They need to hear this." The meeting took place on Harmony Station, a massive space facility that served as the headquarters for the Free Worlds Alliance. Representatives from 43 different species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall. Unlike the old Galaxy Council chambers, this room was designed with equality in mind. No one sat higher than anyone else, and every species had an equal voice. Dr. Kate Sullivan stood at the center of the room, addressing beings that would have been unthinkable allies just 5 years ago. "Friends and partners," she began, "we have discovered something that explains why the old Galaxy Council was doomed to fail." She activated a holographic display that showed the ancient ruins and their translations. 50,000 years ago, our galaxy went through the same crisis we just escaped. A central authority tried to control all intelligent species. They succeeded for thousands of years, but eventually their rigid control led to stagnation and collapse. A Worlani representative raised one of her 4 arms. "Dr. Sullivan, are you saying that the Galaxy Council was repeating history?" "Exactly. They were unconsciously following the same pattern that destroyed the previous galactic civilization. By demanding that all species limit their growth and submit to central authority, they were ensuring that the galaxy would eventually stagnate and die." Ambassador Thexari of the Worlani Republic stood up. She had been one of the first aliens to join the Free Worlds Alliance after Earth's withdrawal. Then humanity did not just save themselves by leaving the Council, they saved all of us. Kate nodded. "When Earth refused to submit, we broke the pattern. Instead of stagnating under central control, the galaxy began to grow and change again. The Free Worlds Alliance represents something new: cooperation without domination, progress without central authority." Commodore Jake Morrison was not at the meeting. He was leading the largest exploration mission in galactic history, pushing into regions of space that no one had ever seen before. His fleet included ships from 12 different species, all working together to map new star systems and search for signs of life. Commodore, his navigation officer, reported, "Long range. Scanners have detected something incredible. There is an entire spiral arm beyond the radiation barrier that we never knew existed. And sir, there are signs of intelligent life." Jake felt the same excitement that had driven humans to explore Earth's oceans and continents thousands of years ago. "Signal the fleet. We are going to make first contact with a completely unknown civilization. This is what the Free Worlds Alliance was built for." Meanwhile, in the old Galaxy Council chambers, Chancellor Vextar sat alone at his desk. Most of the council members had left to join the Free Worlds Alliance, or to establish independent governments. Only a handful of the most traditional species remained, clinging to the old ways even as their civilization crumbled around them. "Sir," his assistant said quietly, "the Manthari Empire has formally dissolved their membership. That leaves only 7 species in the council." Vexatar looked at the empty chairs in the council chamber. Once, over 200 species had bowed to the council's authority. Now most of the galaxy had moved on to something better. "What about the humans?" he asked. "Sir, Earth has established colonies in 4 different galactic arms. Their population has tripled in 5 years. Some estimates suggest that humans will outnumber all other intelligent species combined within 50 years. Vextar felt very old and very tired. "And they still refuse to negotiate with us?" "President Turner's position has not changed, sir. Earth will deal with individual species and governments, but never again with the Galaxy Council as an institution." Dr. Marcus Webb was busy planning the integration of 3 new species into the Free Worlds Alliance. His office was filled with translation equipment and cultural guides as he worked to help newcomers understand how the Alliance operated. "Dr. Webb," his assistant said, "we have received a formal request from the Zephyrian Republic. They want to leave the Galaxy Council and join the Alliance." Marcus looked up in surprise. The Zephyrians had been the most powerful supporters of the old council system. What changed their minds? "Their economy has collapsed, sir. Without access to Alliance trade networks, they cannot maintain their standard of living." "Chancellor, Vextar's government has fallen, and the new leadership wants to establish relations with Earth." Marcus considered this carefully. "Send them our standard membership requirements. They must formally renounce any claim to authority over other species and accept the Alliance principles of equality and mutual cooperation." President Turner stood in his office, looking out at the lights of Washington at night. Through his windows, he could see the launch trails of ships heading to the stars. Every day, thousands of humans left Earth to build new lives on distant worlds, carrying with them the values of freedom and independence that had driven Earth to leave the Galaxy Council. "Mr. President," his chief of staff said, "the final species count is in. 78% of all known intelligent species have either joined the Free Worlds Alliance or established independent relationships with Earth. The Galaxy Council now represents less than 5% of galactic civilization." Turner smiled. "And exploration?" "Commodore Morrison's mission has made contact with 6 new intelligent species in the outer spiral arms. All of them have expressed interest in joining the Alliance. Sir, we are discovering new worlds and new civilizations faster than we can process the applications for membership." Turner walked to his desk and picked up a letter that had arrived that morning. It was from a group of young aliens on a planet called Nexar Prime. They had written to thank Earth for showing the galaxy that there was an alternative to the old system of central control. "Mr. President," one part of the letter read, "our grandparents lived under the Galaxy Council's rules for their entire lives. They were told what they could build, where they could travel, and how fast they could grow. Now we live in a galaxy where our only limits are our imagination and our willingness to work. Our children will grow up free because humanity chose to be free." Turner put the letter down and looked out at the stars again. 5 years ago, the Galaxy Council had tried to force humanity to choose between submission and isolation. They had expected Earth to choose submission, like every other species had done for thousands of years. Instead, Humanity had chosen a third option: transformation. They had used their isolation to become something new, something stronger, and something that could offer the galaxy a better future. The old galaxy was dying, but a new one was being born. And a